Good day, learners. Welcome to Quarter 3, Module 1 on examining biases for and against made by the author. By the way, I am Princess Catherine Zambale, your teacher for today. Before we proceed with our topic, let us discuss our online class rules. Okay? As you can see, we have here a mute or unmute button. Freely express yourself during class discussion and wait for your turn to speak. Next, we have here enable and disable camera. Always be ready when asked to verbally or non-verbally communicate with everyone. So you can smile, you can nod, and you can do thumbs up. And of course, you can use the reaction button on our Zoom application as we could have our lesson for today. Let us continue. We also have this raise hand button. Any clarification and point of discussion is highly encouraged in class. Lastly, since we are using Zoom platform, we will be navigating the breakout rooms. And I would like you to cooperate, participate in all the individual and group activities. Let us continue. So here are the objectives of the lesson. So at the end of this module, you are expected to identify example of bias, examine bias in various texts, and discuss ways on how to avoid biases. Okay? So basically, remember that first we will identify example of biases, then you need to examine the bias in various texts, and lastly, you have to discuss ways on how to avoid biases. Will not end on just defining or identifying or even examining, but we need to discuss ways how to avoid them. Let us continue. Okay, before we move on to our discussion, let us have this pre-test. Since this is our first topic, okay, read the following statements carefully, then answer the questions that follow. Let us begin. Okay, but before that, prepare your ballpen and your pen. Okay. My son's girlfriend is very rude. She calls so late at night, sometimes as late as 10 at night. Last week, she called me Sarah instead of Mrs. Reyes. I quickly corrected her. So disrespectful. Today, she came over for lunch and brought cookies without even asking if it was okay. What if I had already made cookies? The author is biased against A. Rude children, B. Her son, C. Her son's girlfriend, or D. Dating. Okay, so what is your answer? Okay, if your answer is C, then you are correct. If not, let's move on to the second item. It's okay. So which of the underlined words help show the author's bias? My son's girlfriend is very rude. She calls so late at night, sometimes as late as 9 at night. Last week, she called me Sarah instead of Mrs. Olson. I quickly corrected her. A. Girlfriend. B. Rude. C. Weak. Or D. Cold. Okay. Choose your answer. If your answer is B, then correct. Okay. Now let's move on to number 3. What does it mean to show bias? Okay, so based from the previous examples, now, what do you think is the meaning of bias? A, to be angry. B, to favor one side over another. C, to refuse to take a side. Or D, to show knowledge. Okay, what does it mean to show bias? The correct answer is B. Okay, it's all right. If you did not get it, it's okay, since this is just a pre-test. Okay, let us continue. Number 4, which statement is not an example of author bias? A, the #1 COVID-19 vaccine is Moderna's vaccine. B, AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine is the best of all. C, Chinese COVID-19 vaccine Sinovac is 50.38% effective. Or letter D, the most effective COVID-19 vaccine is the one manufactured by Pfizer Incorporated and BioNTech. Okay, which among this does not show author bias? Okay, opens up. The answer is letter C. Okay, so let us find out later on why it's letter C. And let's move on to the last item, which refers to the preference or opinion that prevents one from approaching a topic with neutral point of view. Okay, so what do you think is the correct answer? A, loaded language, B, credibility, C, preference, or D, bias? Okay, so what is your answer? If you say D, then you're correct. Okay, who got perfect score? Okay, you may chat on the chat box. Please kindly encode how many scores you got. Oh, good. Others got perfect and others got 4 only, but it's okay. Don't worry. Later on, we'll discuss more about author's bias. Okay. So basically, now let us discuss what is bias. Bias in writing can be defined as a prejudice against something an author is writing about. So we have here the word prejudice. This has something to do with your assumption about a topic. Okay, so this is already in your mind before something happened, or this is your assumption about someone, assumption about or your opinion about something like that. Or it can also be favoritism for something an author is writing about. This is very timely these days. Since we have the election, who are you in favor with? All right. Now we have an author letting feelings or emotions cloud his or her objectivity with regard to something he or she is writing about. So we have here the uh, author letting feelings or emotions cloud his or her objectivity because the author is becoming so subjective. She is including her personal experiences, including her feelings or emotions, and even her opinions in writing a certain topic. And of course, as a writer, later on, we will be discuss how are we going to avoid these biases in writing. Okay, so bias is a subjective way of thinking that tells only one side of a story, sometimes leading to inaccurate information or a false impression. Remember, bias is very subjective. It is focusing on personal point of view or your personal preference, even your opinion about something. Okay, so bias can be seen or often present in, oh, what do you think is that? Editorial, that's correct. How about this picture? Okay, so it's also present in or sometimes present in advertisement, sometimes or often, right? Or most of the time, really. Okay, then we have here, okay, we have freedom, religion. What do you think is this? Religious publication. And lastly, what do you think are these? These are political materials such as banners, flyers, or posters with your or with different politicians, okay, or the candidates in a election. So we have their Marcos now more than ever, and then sigaw ng bayan, si Cory ang kailangan. Okay. So we have different favorites and you can see biases in political materials. All right, let's move on. Okay, now let's continue. So it's also present in research. Really? Let's see these pictures. We have here two researchers, and the other one said, do you have any data that will fit my theory? Oh, there. So the researcher has his theory already, and they will just look for data that will prove his theory. Remember, in science, we always begin with identifying the problem. Okay, so you cannot conclude yet unless you already have your data. Okay. Of course, a disclaimer, in research, they also have different ways on how to validate and make their results reliable. They can use triangulation or SPSS or different application or statistical tool that will make their data more reliable or factual or acceptable like that. Another picture. So we have here a researcher saying, I believe. And then Mr. Snail said, slow down, the evidence isn't complete. All right. Now, let us discuss how to avoid biases. And let's try to examine some of the statements mentioned here. Writers should write objectively and inclusively to receive respect and trust from readers. So, instead of being objective, instead of being subjective rather, or biased, we have to be objective when we are writing. Okay? Now, as you can see on this picture, she's smiling. We can see on her gesture that perhaps she is so contented or satisfied with what she's reading. Okay, so that should be our aim. Of course, let's continue. So we have the first one, generalization. Avoid making generalizations by not saying or implying that all or nothing is true. Okay, we should not generalize. We should not conclude that it's for everyone. Okay, we have here a bias statement. Educators do not consider each child's particular learning style when developing lessons. Let us focus, let us examine. Okay, so I used here this icon. When we say child's learning style, it is pertaining to visual learner. Are you a visual learner? Okay. So if you are a visual learner, you may click the raise hand button. Okay. Are you an auditory? Do you learn best when you're listening to radio or listening to teachers? Or are you reading or writing? Are you good at understanding the topic when you're reading it? Or lastly, kinesthetic. When you say kinesthetic, when you are moving, when you are doing sports, you learn best. Okay? So how do we make this bias statement better? Let us continue. Some educators do not consider each child's particular learning style when developing lessons. So what did we add instead of making it generalized or what did we add to just simply put or not include other educators perhaps? All right, so instead of saying educators, because that's including me, of course, in my case, I always consider my students' particular learning style. We made it some educators. All right, now we have the evidence. Support statements with research or answer the question according to which researchers or sino ang researcher niyan. Okay, or who said that? Sino may sabi niyan? Okay, we have here bias. Boys are more likely to engage in computer and mobile games, skip school with their peers, and start drinking and smoking. Oh, boys. What is your reaction about this statement? It's trying to say that you are more likely to engage in computer and mobile games. How do you react on this? Click the reaction button. Okay, since I cannot see you, I don't know how you are reacting. So we'll be using this nonverbal feature of our Zoom application. All right. So let's see how can we make it better. In David's 2018 study of the out-of-school children aged 5 to 15 years in the Philippines, boys are more likely to engage in computer and mobile games, skip school with their peers, and start drinking and smoking. All right. So we added here David. Okay, David is the surname of, or this is the author, and then 2018 was the time when he conducted the research. Okay, and or the year rather, and then he is not pertaining to all of you boys here. As you can see, children age 15, 5 to 15 years, and boys out of school, meaning they are perhaps dropouts or those kids who are not going to school. So you're not included here. You don't need to feel mad or sad about the statement of ago. All right. So remember, we have to put who said that. Okay, let's continue. Another one, self-awareness. Be aware of your own biases and how these may be expressed in writing. So we also have biases. Of course, we all have biases. So we have assumptions about professions. Teacher should use technology when she's teaching her class. I want you to focus on the statement here. And we have the profession teacher. Okay. What is the bias about that statement? Okay. So how do we make it better? Teachers should use technology when they are teaching their classes. As you can see here, the teacher, and then now they use the pronoun she, which is only pertaining to female teachers. It's just like an assumption that if we say teacher, it's automatically a woman. Of course, it's not uh, it's not correct. How about your teacher or your sirs, right? Or your male teachers? So in order to make it better, we use they instead of she. All right. And I also use here photo of a male teacher teaching the students. Of course, we should be uh, gender sensitive. All right, let's move on. We have another self-awareness. Be aware of your biases in terms of statements based solely on personal experience. Okay, remember, personal experience is so subjective. We have the bias statement. My daughter checks her phone constantly, which shows that teenagers use smartphones more than they did in the past. So there's only his or her daughter. It's only of one person. And now the parent or perhaps, yeah, or a relative of that child is now concluding that it's applicable to everyone. So how do we make it better? Teenagers' use of smartphones specifically for social media has increased 33% in the last 2 years. That's according to Sales in 2019. So it's already 2022. So 2022 minus 2019. So that's three years. And then last 2 years, 2017. All right. Okay, so that was conducted 2017 pa pala. All right. So let's move on. Okay, so instead of saying your daughter, we have to say teenagers. Okay, and then include who said that. So that's Alice. 20. Next, we have to be sensitive also when we are writing. There are different topics that will be discussed later on. And sensitive language helps you avoid bias. We need to consult to APA 7, Chapter 5, Bias-Free Language Guidelines for more information. Okay, remember during the first quarter, we talked about bibliography. And one of the formats that we could use is the APA format. Now, they also have format for gender sensitive or sensitivity in terms of writing. You can research more about it by surfing the net. I'll send you the link or you can see the link later on. Okay, so instead of being descriptive or descriptive, we have to be specific. Let's have example. I surveyed older adults while collecting data. Okay, now on the chat box, I want you to think of the specific age of that older adult while collecting data. How do you think, or what do you think is the age of those adults when you say older adults? Oh, so you said 60, 70, 50? Oh, let's find out. Okay, I surveyed participants between ages 70 to 84. So those are older adults. Okay, so instead of saying older adults, we have to be specific on their age. Okay, so I also tried my best to find illustration that will uh, describe different backgrounds. All right, let's continue. Another sensitive topic, use up-to-date terms for sexual identity. So this is a very sensitive topic. So listen carefully. How are we going to make it bias-free? All right. Can you see this picture below? Okay, if you see this picture, what do you think the rainbow symbolizes? Okay, did you say the uh, LGBT? Then you're correct. Okay. So the population who were homosexual in the survey responded no, 75% of the time. That's according to Martin 2010. Okay. So what is bias in this statement? And how do we make it better? The population who were lesbian responded no 75% of the time. That's according to Martin 2010. Okay, so instead of saying homosexual, because it may refer to two different uh, sex, we have lesbian and what's the other one? Gay, right? So we have to be specific that these homosexuals were the lesbians. Let us continue. According to Random House sensitive language, the term homosexual to describe a man or woman is increasingly replaced by terms gay for men and lesbian for women. Therefore, the following terms are preferred to make the meaning clear. I want you to take note of this. Lesbians, gay men, bisexual men, or women. Okay, so these are the acceptable terms according to Random House sensitive language. Okay, so here I put the link. You may take screenshot and you may do your personal research about it. All right. So when you see them, of course, they can be called lesbians, gay men, bisexual men, or women. Or of course, there was a time when a student asked me, how are we going to address them? Okay. So perhaps you can ask them, excuse me, how do you want me to call you? How do you want me to address you? Like, okay. Or if you're close to that person, of course, you still need to be respectful. All right. Now, we have use people first language when discussing labels. So this time, we'll be talking about medical terms. Okay. Do you see the picture below? So if a man is having seizure, what do you think is his medical condition? All right, epilepsy, correct. Okay, so the epileptics, they say that epileptics, it's bias here, that the term they use for for a person who has epilepsy is epileptics, okay? Consulted with specialists during the trial to address their particular needs. So instead of saying epileptics, we can say the individuals with epilepsy. Remember, we have to use the people first language when discussing labels. All right, let's go back. So individuals with epilepsy, instead of saying epileptic. Epileptic might be a negative term for them. All right, let's move on. So in research, I also did a lot of researches, of course. Labels are often generated when we use adjectives as collective nouns. In medical terms, avoid using labels. The disabled, do not say this one. Of course, to our PWD or people with disabilities, do not say you are so disabled. It is very hurtful. Or the schizophrenics. Instead, you say people with disabilities, or the PWD, people diagnosed with schizophrenia. It has something to do with medical or mental health conditions. So the APA Manual of Style also recommends using emotionally neutral expressions when describing people with disabilities, person with AIDS rather than AIDS victim, or a person with emphysema rather than person suffering from emphysema. Yeah, because if you say suffering, it has a negative connotation to them. All right. So remember, we can use person with AIDS or person with emphysema. Can also use people diagnosed with schizophrenia or people with disabilities. Right. Okay, so we have here, you might encounter students or classmates with uh, special needs. Of course, you have to consider uh, the following, right? Now, I have here an illustration. Here at the middle, it says gender equality. Okay, what is that object that they are standing on? All right, okay. Did you say uh, timbangan? Timbangan, you said timbangan or weighing scale, that's right. Okay, so how do you describe it based on its illustration? So it is balance. So we have to aim for gender equality, or even in our writing, we have to be respectful, we have to be sensitive to different genders. Let's move on. Okay, remember, generic campus publications such as school bulletins or communications that are part of continuing series such as newspaper or our annual report should aim for reasonable representation of all groups involved. Okay, now I think you're ready for our activity. Avoid bias. We have the next exit. Activity time. Part 1. Revise the bias information presented about the Igorot tribe. Make a reasonable, factual, and fair representation by doing research about them. Okay, so we're done discussing about gender. We also discussed about medical terms. And now we'll be focusing on our indigenous people, specifically the Igorots. So what is the biased thing or the written about them? Let's find out. Okay, and we have to make it reasonable, factual, and fair. Here is the situation. I want you to focus on the TV screen or the computer screen. It says here that Salon 6 probe on erroneous portrayal of Igorots in depth and self-learning modules. So I researched about this topic, and as you can see on the picture, there are modules for elementary students. And here's the situation. Mountain Province Representative Maximo Dalog Jr. has called out the Department of Education about the self-learn module that portrayed the Igorots as having curly hair. All right. So it says there that ako ay si Diego, isa akong Igorot, kulot na kulot ang itim kong buhok. So I am Diego, I am an Igorot, my hair is black and curly. So let's continue. Having curly hair is not the appropriate description of Igorots. It's according to Maximo Dalog, which is one of the collective terms for people of the Cordilleras. Dalog said, we wish to inform you, the textbook authors, that physically we Igorots are generally similar to the Filipino majority, just like that of Dr. Remo and Mrs. Espelita. Okay, so Dr. Remo and Ms. Espelita are the authors of this module. Okay, he wrote in his February 4 letter to Education Secretary Leonor Briones. All right, so he wrote a letter to Secretary Leonor Briones telling her about this erroneous DepEd self-learning module. And she mentioned facts here. So instead of focusing on the physical feature, perhaps I underlined here people of Cordillera. Okay, so we can focus on their location. Where can we basically see them? So they are basically in the Cordillera. Okay, let's continue. Or we can also say that the Igorots are generally similar to Filipino majority. So these are facts mentioned by Representative Maximo Dalo. Okay, so I'll be showing you more. Okay, so here is your output. We have the bias statement. Ako ay si Diego, isa akong Igorot. Kulot na kulot ang itim kong buhok. I am Diego, I am an Igorot. My hair is black and curly. How about you? What is your assumption about Igorots? If you hear the word Igorot, how do you see them in your mind? How do you describe them? Okay, you said dark, you said curly hair. Okay. Now, later, let's see if that bias of yours will change. I'll be showing you pictures of them. Okay, so how do we make it better? Okay, in your notebook, please try to write down, or in the chat box, you may chat your answer. Okay, let's move on. So I also search random Facebook posts about Igorots. So that you can know more about them. So here, all right. So this is a girl and she's basically an Igorot. Do you see her? Can you see her? And it was posted last February 6, 2021. And yes, it's true. Up to these days, I've always encountered people asking if we have tails or that we were headhunters. Okay, as you can see, she has no curly hair. And look at her skin complexion. I think she has a fair skin complexion. Okay. So you really need to know more about them instead of focusing on your assumptions or your prejudice against them. Okay, so I also found this Facebook post that's saying, I am an Igorot, you say I am stinky. You've just met me at my bad times, but I do take a bath regularly. You claimed I'm ignorant? No, I'm not. I don't lack knowledge. I'm competent, aware, and educated. You say I have tails? Oh, they have tails now. They have what they call this. Yes, the tail. Buntot, ayan. I don't have tails. Don't be misguided by the wrong notion. That's just a piece of clothing from my forefathers, traditionally known as cheese string, but others mistook it as a tail. You say I don't know fashion? You're wrong. I may not dress as fabulous as you are, but I know about fashion. I am not boastful to show the world what I have by simply dressing up. I just prefer to be simple. You say I am barbarian? It was you who made me fierce and cruel, but I am a cultured and civilized person. I am an Igorot, born from the high mountains of Cordillera, right? You can focus on that. I have my own flaws too, just like you. I curse, I shout, I fight, and as normal as you, but I never look down to other people and think I'm better than them. Despite of all the unjust criticism or the biases that I encounter, I would still stand firmly and never back down. I would never be ashamed to be called an Igorot anywhere I go. I would never belittle other people just what you're doing to me right now. I know how to respect, so I deserve to be respected too. So here, I hope this serves as an eye opener to everyone. Oh, I also got this picture, and he's also an Igorot. As you can see, he has the G string here, and oftenly people mistook it as their tail or their buntot daw. Yeah. So be careful on what you are writing. All right. And we also have here another output that you can choose to write on. This disabled blind student took the exam with special keyboard. So how are we going to make it better statement? Okay. Write down your answer. Okay. Instead of saying disabled blind, how do we call them? or how should we call them? All right, you chat there. Did you say visually impaired or students who are visually impaired? Then you are correct. Okay, so you can say the student who is or who is visually impaired took the exam with special keyboard. Okay, let's continue. Now here is your group work for 30 points. Later with the breakout rooms, you'll be joining in the room and you'll do this activity. In this time of pandemic and election 2022, you can hear different kinds of news. Find the author's biases on the news you have heard or read in social media and news articles. Take screenshot and work in groups on how you can better improve the text. Then below, justify for 15 points your statement by providing factual statement about topic based on your research. Then you have to present it. Present your output in forms you are comfortable with using, it can be PowerPoint presentation, video presentation. If you're inclined into song, you're good at songwriting or poem writing, poster with caption or Facebook post, just like what we did. So we have the format. Again, we have the bias statement and then the better statement. Then after that, below, you need to put your short description and illustration below. All right. Let's move on. Okay. Do not forget, that's for 30 points. All right, this is another topic and this will be our another activity and the last one. Using this link below, this is the link. In one sentence, share what you have learned about the topic. So that's in the Padlet. All right, so thank you so much and special thanks to SlideGo for this presentation template downloaded for free. Okay, so once again, yeah, I also included the references here for further research about the topic. All right. So thank you so much, Slides Go. And once again, this is teacher Princess Catherine Zambale. Yeah, and I hope you learned about our topic. I'll be sending your LAS1 in your group chat. Don't forget to take screenshot. Okay, so that would be all for today. Goodbye, everyone.